In this video, I'm going to share with you how I made my very own programmable macropad with a custom PCB and mechanical switches. Ever since I figured out how to make simple PCBs using my CNC machine, I've been on the lookout for a cool project to use this technique on. And so, rather than making my life simple and just simply buying one, I decided to make it myself. Right guys, let's have a quick rundown of all the components we're going to use for this project. To start off with, these are some very basic mechanical keyboard switches I bought from Amazon. They're not the fanciest, but I believe they'll get the job done. And going forward, if the project actually works the way I have in mind, maybe I'll go for some nicer ones, but for the time being, I think these will do the job just fine. For our microcontroller, we're going to be using this Pro Micro board, mainly because a computer can recognize this as an external device like a keyboard. So once it's all hooked together and this is connected to my PC, it will recognize it as a keyboard, just making it a bit easier to use. We're going to throw in this rotary encoder. This is what I'm going to use to control the volume on my computer. Just very simple rotation to increase and decrease. And lastly, I'm also going to throw in this OLED screen. And this will show you visually what button you have selected. So when you press a button, it should show up in here what software or applications are going to be launched. And it just gives it a nice visual feel. So those are the main components. Once I had all the components ready, I jumped into KiCAD and made a schematic and then a PCB design. Now fortunately, someone in the community had already created a KiCAD footprint for this exact mechanical switch, so I was able to use that in my design. Then I used my CNC machine to mill out the PCB design from KiCAD. If you would like some more details on how I went through this, then I'll leave a link to my video where I go into a lot more detail on all the steps included to make your own PCB using a CNC. Right guys, here's a finished PCB and it's looking pretty good so far. So we've got our traces, through holes and some spaces for the keyboard switches to sit in as well. So that's come off really nicely. It's time to get this soldered up and hopefully it all works. Right guys, so an interesting problem that I've had to find a little workaround for. Somewhere along the line, I made a mistake in wiring up the OLED. I suspect it was when I was making my PCB in KiCAD, but the traces for the I2C pins weren't good. They weren't the right pins, so I had to basically terminate a couple of the traces earlier and then manually solder a couple of wires to get them into the right places. And now I've had a quick test, the screen is working. So a little bit of a hiccup, but in the bigger scheme of things, it doesn't make too much of a difference. So now we're going to go ahead and carry on working on the software side. Right guys, so here we have a view of my desktop and the soldered Macropad. So for now, I've just programmed these keys to launch a couple of creator tools that I use and some general Windows software just to get things working. So for example, this switch here, once I press it, you should see a little display here showing the program and the program coming up here. So let's go. So you can see that's Prusa slicer coming up over there. That's loaded up all fine. This one does paint. It's not something I use regularly, but it's good to test with. And then this one does Fusion 360. You can see that loading up there. So that's all working as planned. I'll probably change the assignment once I know exactly what I want to use these keys for, but for now we know we've got it working. The next step is to go ahead and 3D print a really cool case for this, so that's what we're going to move on to now. And after loads of iterations, trial, error and revisions, I was able to finalize a design that I was happy with. So I tried to keep the design for this as simple as possible. There was a small channel for the board to slide into, and then I printed an end piece that was held in just by friction to stop the PCB from coming out. So far so good. Now it was time to move on to modelling some keycaps for the switches. So I jumped back into Fusion 360 and made a rough model of the mechanical switch, and then I used that as a template to model the keycap off of. In terms of the software, there were some general ones like Calculator and Notepad, and then there was some more specialist software that I use quite regularly in my workflow. So for example, Prusa Slicer, the Arduino IDE and Fusion 360. The keycaps hold themselves onto the mechanical switch using just friction. No glue or fixing is needed here. Alright everybody, so it's time for the final test now. Here's our Macropad, that's all connected to the computer via this USB-C. So I'm going to go ahead now and press each of the buttons in sequence, and as I do you should see the name of the software appear on the OLED and obviously the software launch on the computer. So let's go from the first one, Notepad. Perfect. This should launch Calculator. This is for Prusa Slicer. That's popped up in the background there. That's working. Notion, the Arduino IDE, and last but not least, Fusion 360. I think sometimes they pop up in the background. That's loading up just there, you can see. So perfect guys, exactly what we had in mind. All the keys are working, and I'm also able to adjust the volume using this control of the rotary encoder. So all in all, I'm really happy the way this has turned out. So guys, I had a lot of fun building this project, and while this is definitely not on the same level as a more polished professional Macropad you can buy, this was a really fun learning experience. If you enjoyed this video, then you might also enjoy this video where I share how I make custom PCBs using a CNC machine at home. Otherwise, please don't forget to like, subscribe and comment down below, and I'll see you all in the next video.